Restart.
All right, I will call to order the August 27th work session for the Dayton City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll just give a little background because it's been a while since we were all back here in the same room. So we all met previously, well, I'll start with, on March 7th, the Planning Commission met this year. That was the meeting where they reviewed the draft master plan, so that was the full document that included all the different design standards and sections like that. And a lot of it was discussed, including architecture, housing, density, transportation, land use, park, and then the character of the downtown area, which is the pink on the land use maps. The direction from Planning Commission at that time was to hold a joint session with City Council to review the land use for the master plan boundary area. So that joint work session was held on May 2nd, so a couple months ago. At that work session, we had a robust discussion on land use and transportation for the master plan area. And at that time, there was strong input to reevaluate the master plan transportation area, specifically the roadway connections and networks. So as a follow-up from that, I was not present at the June 11th meeting for City Council, but Jason was, and gave some background information on the current Dayton Parkway alignment. Specifically giving some history on how it came about and why it is the way it is. So I don't know that I need to go through that again. Planning Commission, I don't believe, was at the work session, but that was all at that work session. Or I guess I don't know if it was a work session or council. Council. Okay. So we won't go over really a lot of that tonight, just because we're focusing on the land use specifically. To get that addressed so we can move this master plan forward, and then we're tentatively scheduled, and this we're confirming, but the next steps for this would be to hold an open house on September 17th is the day we've identified. We'll send notices out for that, similar to what we did for the previous open house. Same location, it'll be at the activity center in the historic village on that evening. So that would be the next step, and then following that, we would take comments from this meeting, would go into the document for that open house. Following the open house, we'd make any adjustments to the document based on input or feedback, also incorporating all the comments we receive as part of the report that would then go before Planning Commission and City Council for formal adoption. So that would be the next comment period, would be those two meetings, and then we would then finalize based on the adopting the final document, essentially. That's the approved document. So the goal here tonight is essentially to take the land use and make decisions on what elements you like. So these are the three options we had before. I didn't change them up too much because we didn't come to a consensus on a lot of the land use decisions from the last meeting, so I didn't want to make any assumptions on my part, so I could leave these open-ended. These three options in front of you are just three of the possibilities. You can mix and match different aspects if you like certain aspects of one and certain aspects of another. The whole point is to get your input so that we can essentially come up with a plan for what we see this master plan area looking like with a land use perspective. The only restrictions we have on it are we do have to hit our density. This is all based on 3 units, so I know Met Council's been discussing for the future 2050 of going up to 4 units an acre. This does not take that into account, as that plan's not adopted, and I go into that, but the public comment period is ongoing, so a lot of us are commenting on some of those future plans. So this only takes into account the existing 3 units an acre that we have to hit. So there's a certain number of units within this master plan boundary area we have to hit. So based on the existing land use, that's 5,099 units. All of these options are well above that. It just means we can't reduce the high density residential too much. We can't reduce the medium density residential too much, because we'll start getting below the number of units we have to get in this area to balance the whole city as 3 units an acre. Because this is one of the more denser areas planned for Dayton, as it is seen as a town center with commercial and higher density residential options.
What is the density for the high density units per acre again that we're running this at?
20, I think.
So in the packet, each of them had a table with it. Option 1 kept so this option here kept the density at minimum density for high density at 15. Option 2 and 3 upped it to 20 units an acre. So these two here, basically you can get more units on less acres of land when you up the density. So we can have more low and medium in these options because the density is upped in those. And essentially what you'll have to do, planning for the future when this gets as part of the comprehensive plan, You just have to prove that that's a feasible density to hit for a project. So you can't, it's basically saying that when you do a high density project, you can't just up the minimum density to 25, 30, 35, 40, because you start getting out of the realm of possibility where the property can't be developed that way. So as part of an effort, you just have to prove that a property could develop at that minimum density and at least hit what you've set, so you don't make a property undevelopable by bringing that minimum up so high. And that's based on Met Council determination that you've done that adequately. 20, going from 15 to 20 is, one, it's not a huge change in density for high density residential, and pulling data from recent projects I worked on in other communities and other people within my company have worked on in other communities, 20 units an acre is a pretty easy threshold to hit for high density residential. You could probably go to 25, but any higher than that, you'd start having to move into a more urbanized area that would have the capacity for very, very tight lots and development.
So you went higher, though. I mean, that's kind of what we're creating is a little urban core here.
Right. So you could go higher specifically within probably the mixed use area and
Correct.
not the.
Yes.
So the mixed use area right now is at 12. So we could go higher, assuming in the mixed use all assumes that 60% of the mixed use is residential. So mixed use is intended to be a flexible category that has commercial, residential, maybe some office in there. When we do our calculations on mixed use, it's assumed that 60% of that is going to develop at residential. So it doesn't impact the same way high density does, but you can up that density range if you want to as well. We didn't as part of this, so each of the categories you'll see in the table we did is 12 units an acre assumed for a minimum density. They can go well above that, obviously, before they hit the max, which is 60. So we could tighten that category up if we want to show that we have a higher minimum density. That would essentially get you a higher minimum units that you'd have in there, which would then allow you to either reduce some of the high density around it or throw some more low density in where medium density may be, or things like that. So it's part of each of these categories. I'll kind of point out the caveats from each of them. You'll notice that option 3 is the option that where we heard the desire for potentially some more business park, not heavy industrial, more of a business park use that would be in this southwest corner of the master plan boundary, so adjacent to 117th and East French Lake. So that's one highlight from this option. You'll notice in this option 2, which has higher density for the high density residential, there is more buffering from this existing community down here. So you'll see on both of these, essentially you start with medium density right across the street. This is the only option that brought in low density to kind of transition low to medium to then there's high in the middle here. So that's another piece of that where that comes into play. And then this option over here kept the high density residential at that same 15 units an acre for a minimum, so none of the land use is really modified that much. That's kind of the base option if we don't adjust the densities for that high density land use.
So that's the primary difference between 1 and 2 is buffering.
Yep,
buffering. I don't see much else.
Right, and that's, we get
too, so it'd be
some leeway when you up the density from 15 to 20, but it's not enough to really make significant changes to the whole area. So looking at it, this was just an option I put together. We could do that somewhere else, but I felt because this is an existing community and coming from a lot of low density residential all on this side, maybe that was the most appropriate area to have a little more buffering. But we could put that up to medium and have it scale back over in this corner. There's plenty of options.
I think at some point you have to transition from low to medium. So
At some point,
no matter what, it's got to go from yellow to orange.
Yeah.
And
So because all you're going to do then is a new development would come in there at lower residential, and then you're going to have low right next to medium no matter what. So you're always going to have that transition.
Right.
It's just the only difference being it's an existing neighborhood, not a future one.
and if 20, if your 20 is our minimum number, which is, it sounds like it's easy to hit. I'm not sure why we would even mess with the setting to 15. I mean, this gives us more headroom. So to
I
me,
agree.
option 1 should just.
To me, the single most important thing about this whole square is where's the roadways gonna go?
They're in there, yeah.
Speaking of which, I know you said you talked about the history,
Yep.
but the last work session, there was a discussion that kind of derailed it
Yep.
about redoing or looking at redoing it.
Yep.
Is that not off the table now, I guess? Is that when the history
Yeah, so
discussion-
basically that was brought at a separate meeting after, because it was
Okay.
at
So
the
that's
June
all.
11th City Council.
Okay.
Jason provided the background. The transportation plan is the transportation plan. The roadway is where it is. We're going to try and just focus on the land use today, because the way things have happened, we have the connection points for the roadway, and that's where they are.
Makes sense.
And
I
we'll
just
work
wanted to
to
be sure, because we got derailed last time.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to focus this on land use so we can make some decisions on that. And then when you see the whole plan as part of the public hearings and everything like that, then we can certainly make comments on adjustments to architecture, housing, design standards, streetscape, all these other things that are components of it. Where Planning Commission has seen that once, Council has not seen the full document. So seeing that as well.
The other question I have is we can come up with all these plans. I mean, this isn't going to happen for 15 or 20 years, probably.
Yeah, I mean, most of the
There's going to
staging
be
area.
5 or 6 different councils and planning. This is going to change 4 or 5 times between now and then.
Sure.
So it'll probably change when it comes in for a proposal too, right? It's just a
It's going
guide.
to change the
We're
most
trying to
when we
guide
have a
it.
concrete timeline on Dayton Parkway.
Right.
And I think that's where some of this focus should shift to, is understanding what staff thinks that should be. If we're going to develop Salt Dayton, we can't just keep our current transportation system. So I don't know that answer, but
So the
that's,
southern part of the master plan area is in the 2020 staging area. That was the precipitous of us wanting to do the master plan.
Right.
Was that 2020 area.
And then it stages up, and it's like 2030 once you hit about this parcel line, and then the northern
right,
part.
but are we saying we're going to pull the road through in little increments like that?
It's possible that that's the way it'll happen, yeah.
Unless
I don't have a crystal
unless
ball,
council
so I
wants
don't
to
know.
invest in putting the
Invest or
infrastructure in first.
Or
Right.
seek
You know,
outside
build it and
money?
they will come type idea. There's two
Yeah,
different
you'd have
ways
to
to
seek
do it.
outside money.
Typically, you acquire the right of way through development,
Yeah.
Yeah.
unless you were to do a project that was city-led. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
there'd have to be a
Broken
funding
down.
source for that.
It
Um,
seems like if we're targeting density here, this is a prime thing to write grants for. But that's something that council has to approve and do is, I mean, we're setting it up to write a good grant to help us pay for a good chunk of Dayton Parkway, at least up to 125th, by putting this density in. That's what the state, everyone wants to see.
Yeah, and that could be a follow-up of this, is that you use this document to say, hey, we've done a study, we've now evaluated what we want to see in this area, and as part of this, we're going to write this grant application. That'd be something that John would have to kind of lead and then bring to council, but that could be a possibility. I have not done research to know which grants you would apply for.
There's not many.
There's plenty of funding sources out there. The problem is they're highly competitive and they're a long process.
And they're
Every
not
grant process
often
is-
there to put a road in before the growth is actually there. They're a lot of times they're there to address a problem that exists.
Yeah.
My council might have some money because you're helping to push this in the direction that they want us to go to, but there's not a ton of money there from
I
a
think it's
grant
important we
standpoint.
understand this timeline, because it's going to dictate how we
Yeah.
go evaluate staging. Whether that's 200 homes a year, 300, 100. If we don't have a road, we can't justify higher numbers.
Yeah, I definitely think it's unrealistic to think that there'll be a lot of grant money out there to put in Dayton Parkway, maybe to put a trail on Dayton Parkway, through some multimodal funding or something like that. But, it's growth based. A lot of those funding sources don't have a ton of sympathy on, hey, we're growing and we want to put in this road. It's,
Yeah.
we're busting at the seams. We've got a history of accidents. We got a history of this. And then you score really well. But
Why on these plans, and I just came up a little bit last time, but why are we clumping? So typically, these big thoroughfares,
my bad.
you'll see commercial kind of wrap
Thank
the
you.
main drag.
I agree with you, Dennis.
And then you'll see, residential behind it, or it just seems very odd to me to put residential on a main drag. And I don't know how we got to this
I
point.
mean, off the main drag.
They clump together like that.
Well, I mean, maybe a service road, but I don't understand. I mean, if you look at 169, you look at
Yeah.
101.
Yep.
It's all,
That was going to be my question too. Is
One
why
thing
is
to think
residential
about
clump?
is access and intersections.
well,
Meaning that if you have everything going parallel to the road, there's a lot of uses that get far, even though they got good visibility, they get far away from access. And so, not saying that we shouldn't stretch it more like that, but that's one thing you're trying to manage, is like if you have a node, then when you get to that signalized intersection or roundabout, that's where people branch off and go to all the commercial uses, because it is more destination once you're going, it's gonna be neighborhood commercial, it's not gonna be
I get
attractive
that,
regional.
but I mean, to get those commercial those commercial entities seen.
Yeah, they want to be on the
They gotta
main
get-
road.
The biggest thing is they need traffic and not, they get their signage even at the things. Like you drive by, look what's happened at 610 and Zane is a good example. None of those really have that great of visibility. In fact, the way it's orientated, it's about access.
Yep. And I guess I don't get why they did that.
If you're gonna have more, like what you're saying, then you should be thinking more highway-orientated businesses too along the stretch, if that's what we want.
So on the public opinion survey, what the residents wanted was a town square rather than like a,
Okay, that's
A
the
long
big
strip
area,
mall.
right? I think that one's,
So I can explain the reasoning behind why some of that is done the way it is. So
Okay.
because this is not directly off the highway, it's not highway commercial. So it's something that people have to access off of 94. Essentially, they'd be coming north through Dayton. So the
Right.
idea is to find a major intersection that we use to then highlight, and that becomes the corridor that you have. So this intersection here, and I've always been calling it tentatively 121st just because it's halfway between 117th and 125th. With Dayton Parkway will be essentially your major corridor intersection that would then lead into the mixed use area. So that's kind of, as Darren said, that's kind of your area when you have that major intersection to then branch traffic off into the mixed use and then a commercial area and give them good visibility. This easily could be shifted and shift this way north. And we could do residential on this side and we could shift the commercial up along the roadway here. I just felt it was a better option to show the commercial, given where it's shown in the existing land use plan, which I think was up on the screen. The existing land use plan had commercial mostly on the south side here. We wanted to bring it up to tie it into the mixed use area for the town center, to have it transition to the town center area. We could certainly do that along Dayton Parkway here, but Dayton Parkway is a different type of corridor planned for the street itself. It's going to be a parkway, which doesn't lend itself to commercial access as well, just because of the medians and the right of way and things like that, where you might not be able to take a left-hand turn. It might only be a right in, right out access. So businesses tend to prefer being on areas with full access. So given that, there's full access you can get here that you could then turn on to Dayton Parkway, and it's immediately onto a major thoroughfare. So that was just some of the thought process behind why that commercial shifted to where it is currently, and why leading into the park area, then leading out into the greater Dayton area for the community, because this is intended to be a town center and a commercial area for the community first, and then if it draws from larger areas, that's great.
So be it, yeah, okay. Yeah.
But that's kind of the reasoning for why that's shown the way it is.
So we do some split land uses here with the existing parcels, and I think maybe part of your concern potentially could be addressed by almost splitting some land use along there. I think your argument being you're not going to have residential immediately in the middle. You're not going to have Dayton Parkway go through the middle of the residential, I don't think. So I don't know if there's a way to maybe just from a way of representing this, of understanding close to that roadway corridor, you might see business park, commercial, or mixed use. And off of that a little bit, kind of to your point, is off of that, that's where you start to see residential. So I don't know if we can split, kind of like we do down
We
there.
talked
to try
about this
to,
at the last work session, if you recall, Kevin, right?
I wasn't there, so.
Where,
My
because we even
apologies.
talked about,
Yeah.
no, I'm glad you brought it up, because one of this is East French Lake Road. Is that alignment needs to be figured out, because then that industrial use should butt up to it. Not like
It's-
right now, we're drawing the old road, and if that's how it's gonna stay, that's how it's gonna stay, I guess, but I don't think a lot of us think that makes
Yeah,
complete
so
sense.
to your point, if this, like East French Lake, we're envisioning essentially gets realigned to here, this land use, and I just didn't change this portion, but this triangle should likely, if we go with this
Gets
business
extended
park
out,
office,
yeah.
gets extended to that point.
Yeah.
Right.
And then maybe this corner up here changes because this is now a business park. So that's some of the direction I'm looking to see. I know one of the goals initially too was trying to not have split land uses on parcels because of some of the complications it presents. Like there was not a lot of love initially for this type of split. So I tried to not split. So you'll notice that there's very few parcels that actually have a mixed land use on them, that have two separating land uses. And it's pretty much right in this corridor, and they're intended to line up for where Dayton Parkway is. And to be clear, this is a fat line. So if Dayton Parkway shifts over 50 feet because of the topography when it actually gets designed, or 100 feet, the land uses will follow that. Essentially, it's envisioned the east side is commercial, the west side is mixed use. So if this shifts over here to miss some significant natural resource, those land uses will essentially move with them.
And I remember the last meeting, we talked about exactly what we were talking about, but that corner that's medium density residential, between East French Lake Road and, we need to do a split land use on it, no, north.
Here,
Farther
One more corner over, just a little bit over. No, other way,
This way.
towards me.
Towards the lake.
Other way.
over here.
No, right. Maybe you were actually there. Right here. That's what we're trying to talk
Okay, that's why I
about.
pointed at.
Yeah, I thought you were pointing in the other area, but that
Yeah.
it needs to be. We just got to put split land use on the map, otherwise it makes no sense to anybody.
Or memorialize the intent a little bit here, because I think that's what split land use does, is I don't like it, I actually, wouldn't necessarily advocate for it, but I think it helps illustrate intent. But ultimately, what is gonna happen is a developer will come in and have a project that could succeed or not, and if it's, relatively consistent with this, it'd be considered and then go through the necessary approvals. We just need to be able to hit our calculations, right? We need to make the right assumptions to make sure we can hit and preserve low-density residential in other portions of the community. So essentially, I guess what I'm saying is like, this isn't fact. We're going to try to jockey pieces around as best as we can, but if the whole group can come to a sort of consensus on what it would look like in one form or the other, I think other variants of that as they would be proposed, it'd be easy for the body to determine whether or not it's consistent. Although not exact, but consistent.
Yeah, so some of the direction I'm looking is like, do you like the business
Yeah,
park?
that's what I
like,
wanna
is
try
that
to
something
move
you
to a
want
little
to pursue? Like, because I know there's been a lot of industrial development specifically in this direction. Is there appetite for more if it's the right kind within
Or
the
is that
business
too
park,
much?
or is it too much? Do you want to see more residential? These are all things to just.
I don't mind business park, like in Champlin Tiny Brooklyn Park, I think up 169 there on the border, they put those, they look like warehouse, but they're not, there's like a Twin City Twisters in there, and like, that kind of thing. I think that, to me, is what business park is, and so like, I think having a space for that makes sense. There's definitely a draw
The
for
new
business.
Twin Cities Twister,
Yeah.
or the old one?
Uh,
The old
you're
one
talking
is more
Brooklyn Park?
business park in
Yeah.
terms of how
Yeah.
people
Past
define it, not
109th.
the brand new one.
South of 109.
Yeah,
Did
so
they
that would
move?
be Brooklyn.
Yeah, they
the
moved.
old
Oh,
office,
okay.
old side.
South of 100,
Yeah.
109th there.
It's on the east side of 169 now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's borderline, like what Inland
That's
just
almost
built.
like a warehouse.
It's almost
Yeah.
commercial.
It's office warehouse that attracted a retail, and normally they won't
A
take
different kind
those
of user,
users.
right, yeah.
Okay.
If they, that's like their last resort because they just don't have as good as
Fill
credit
space,
as the
yeah.
industrial users, but, that's more office warehouse.
Yeah, I'm just thinking something like, where a Foss could go, or just an example, not saying it's be Foss, but something like
Sure.
that where there's space for those kind of activities to happen too. And I don't know if that's the right space.
When you
Maybe
think
it's
of
not the right
business
space.
park, think smaller users, so call it 10 to 40,000 square foot users.
Yeah.
That's usually what I think of business park.
Is the
I'm thinking-
preference to have a maximum building size?
What's that mean?
I mean, like you're not, say you're not.
Oh,
gonna
in
have
the
a-
business?
Not
Yeah,
a
you're not gonna
million
have a
square
building
feet.
that's,
Oh.
right, more than.
Not gonna have
Not gonna get a million
thousand
square
square
feet.
feet.
No,
No
you're
cubes.
not, but, I mean, how would we set a number on that and then not later on say, whoops, let's.
Well, it's like anything else.
It's
So
arbitrary,
just-
but,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
I'm
it's,
fine with setting a number, but I just
Yeah.
think it might be a waste of time. I guess I think that's a good spot for
Yeah.
business park.
Is it too big?
how many acres
How many
is
acres?
it?
10, 15?
And I would say what's
Maybe
west,
15.
what's west of Dayton Parkway is not very usable.
So-
Oh, it's probably 25.
Yeah, and, yeah.
So this chunk here that's 54 acres.
It is, huh?
So with this corner, you'd probably be at about 60.
And then west of Dayton Parkway is not very usable.
This marshy spot we're kind of seeing right here.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I mean, there
between
is-
the elevation change and,
Yeah.
How much this comes out actually.
And yeah, there is French Lake is a shoreline lake, so coming out to about roughly here is a shoreline boundary, which impacts business, commercial, industrial development more so because it has that 25% shoreline
Yeah.
impervious surface calculation. And you can go above that with CUPs and stuff like that, but it's just harder on businesses that might try to hit like a 70% impervious calculation, which is pretty typical for commercial industrial development, to be restricted to 50, which is the cap for commercial industrial developments in the shoreline. So
So when you put the estimates together for like density, has someone like looked at this land and said, hey, we're assuming that every acre is treated equal, when in reality every acre is not equal in this area? Because there's some of it that you won't put a single building on because it's currently wetlands or marsh or just too much. to
That
actually
should
build
be
on.
shown on these maps, Kevin. It makes it easier for us to.
Yeah, so I tried to print out contour maps to show all
Is
the
in your
elevation,
calculation is what I'm trying to figure out. Did you already figure that into your calculation for density or not?
but- Yes. Yep.
Okay, so you
Unbuildable area.
You take
yes.
into account unbuildable area
Yeah.
and took that out of the calculation. So we're seeing what would.
To a degree. I mean, there's
It's a guesstimation,
because
I guess,
I'm doing all the calculations on this on gross density,
Yep.
which is before you net out all those, like transportation networks, how much roadway are you going to have right away,
Yeah.
things like that. Wetlands, are you going to have, open bodies of water, things like that, don't come out until after you do the net density calculation. So I estimated, they're not accurate calculations when it's on an area of this size, but roughly I said, okay, how many acres of wetland do we have when I do the national wetland inventory? And how many areas do we have that you would not otherwise develop, which means, if this is not the case here, but if parcel lines included French Lake, you would obviously take out the areas of open water because you're not going to develop on a lake. Things like that. So I did do the computations on that
Okay.
to show that, and that's part of just running density anyways, is just evaluating some of those things, those factors to know, and there's some parcels on here that will be or are less favorable for development compared to others. That's just the case with anywhere, is that you have sites that have wetland and you have sites that are farm field and open and great for development, and you have some that may come in and they'll have terrible soils. They might be all clay, but we won't know that until they come in. So
When I think of the business park land use, I support it, but I want to manage what's going on to the east of it, what I believe it's called Dubay Lake. And what, if anything, the city envisions around Dubay Lake, so we don't hurt ourselves on if we're going to do something with that. I don't know, when I say something, it's like maybe it's just parkland or
Maybe like a
whatever.
park on the edge, yeah.
Or trail or whatever, but you want it to flow. 50 acres is about 700 to 750,000 square feet of industrial buildings, just to put that in perspective.
How far east is that from what's on the map?
Dubay Lake,
Dubay
you
Lake.
have a good one right here on it, because it's right here, it's just,
Let's say
it's
you've
just,
got Schmitz's property,
It's the
and it's
wetland
like
area.
right here. Yeah,
I
it's the
believe it's
spot
the
right
wetland
here.
area right here.
So yeah, Dubay, roughly about there. Because the center of Dubay is pretty much right on this property corner, right here.
That there was another smaller one, Powers, or I don't know if it's still called that. Whatever. I thought there was another one in here.
Meaning for lakes?
No, there's not. No, there's
Pow-
not.
Powers Lake, yes. That's at Elm Creek.
You're definitely going to park a trail along that lake for sure, but
I know we're trying to focus on this area, Kevin, but I feel like this conversation's, we still gotta talk about south of 117th. If we're gonna have that business park, is that the idea, to blend in business park with south of 117th?
That's part of just considering whether we want business park in that area, because this is
Right, I
existing.
think we need to redo
This
that.
is existing business park. This would be future business park.
Well, I'm more concerned about the dark purple and red to the south of 117th, and what that's gonna become and how that flows into what we're talking about.
Even which part? This
That part,
All
everything
right.
east of Dayton
That
Parkway,
lake they were
Yeah.
talking about,
where, since it got shifted.
right here.
Yeah.
Up to there.
Yeah, and that's part. I mean, we don't know what that'll ultimately be because it hasn't developed yet. But
What we need to do is fix our comp plan of what we want it to be, because it's probably not gonna be those two things.
I mean, that would come in as an individual comp plan amendment at this point. Right now, someone could develop under this, and it would be, 30% mixed or
I
commercial.
hear what you're saying, but I wanna be proactive, if that's not what the city thinks that is the right land use.
Yeah, to be fair, the master plan that we're doing now is not actually changing the land use as part of the 2040 comp plan.
I get that, but this is part of 2020, our current SALT of 117. Remember when we
Correct,
started
yeah.
this process, that was one of our big gripes, is why did we draw this box and ignore that? And I just don't, I don't want to derail this conversation, but we're talking about land uses abutting to it, so I think it's pertinent that we, discuss it a little bit and make sure that we're on board with what we want it to be.
Is that to kind of help consistency on the north and south side of
Correct.
17?
Yes, and the flow and traffic and everything.
I think this is definitely part of the conversation of what this becomes, because this is how it is. I don't think because of the way, I mean, I was working under the direction that we decided the boundary, and so we're working within this boundary. It's, at this point, it's too late to change that boundary. I mean, we're then changing the plan, we're changing the scope, we're changing the outline of everything that was decided upon, so.
I'm just going to state this, but when we had this conversation day one, I voiced concern to Zach and yourself that, first of all, we can't master plan this big area. We're not that good. We can master plan a smaller chunk like the city center. Like, this conversation should be focused on what we're talking about, land uses and transportation corridor. We don't need to master plan, how many acres is this?
600.
Yeah, we don't need to master plan 640 acres. We need to change land uses. We need to figure out roads, but we don't need to master plan 640 acres.
So that did come up a couple times, and I think a few of us had the same concerns.
Right.
I don't know how we resolved that. I don't remember, but I know I had a concern, definite concern about the 600 acres.
The direction from the council was the square area, so that.
I was at that
And so-
same meeting, and I had multiple conversations with Zach on this, and I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but, you know, I give our whole entity, staff, planning commission, council, a F on this, because we have to have better communication. We shouldn't be master planning 640 acres. And
I'll
we
just-
need to stop
so,
it,
like-
because even to the public input, we're gonna look bad. We can't no one's done it. The last big master plan was the Ramsey Town Center, and look what that happened to that. And that was only 280 acres.
So I'll just, I mean, I think the reasoning, and I will say
And I'm
the
not
same
saying it's
thing I
wrong
said
to
it-
study the area. I'm just saying we
Yep.
can't call the whole thing a master plan.
I mean, we can
Well-
change the title if you want, if it's just a future land use plan
Yes,
evaluation.
land use.
That's
better.
fine if you just don't want to have the master plan.
I think it's better.
But I've done this same type of study on areas anywhere between 200 and 1,000 acres.
Studying is different. Calling it a master, to me, a master plan means you're really figuring out a lot of details.
Okay, I
Like
mean, we can
Maple
change
Grove
the
is
title
now
to it instead of,
Town center.
It's just a
study.
land use. All we're
Yeah.
doing is talking land use. That's all we're doing is transportation and land use.
On the industrial, I mean, is there a consensus to have the business park on the southwest corner?
Makes
So
sense.
I'm gonna mildly rehash what Darren said. Does it make sense to put that business park south of that line?
Well,
and then
that's
put
the
some of
follow-up question.
And then put some of the commercial north of the line to kind of maybe offset the two so it flows better somewhere?
Well, this peg should be along in here.
Yeah, that's exactly, I'm saying the same thing.
To
You-
me,
you-
I mean,
you
that's where
can-
your retail
yeah.
wants to be, is along the main drag.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying too.
That's where it will be, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, we should
If
shift
the-
some of
if
that
the road
business
ends
park
up there,
south
right.
of the boundary and move some of the commercial north of the boundary.
This is DDL right now, and that's gonna happen here real
It
soon.
is, but we're focused within the square.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I like the new commercial business park where it is. My only question is, it's right next to what's supposed to be park, and that seems
so
Like-
there are zoning standards that would make you buffer from the two. So you'd have like a significant 50 or 100-foot buffer.
And there is already grade problems there, there's wetlands there. I think
Yeah.
we'll end up grading, or we'll end up buffering it anyways.
Oh yeah, but I'm just saying then who's going to use that park, right? Like you're making a park and then you're surrounding it with businesses. Then who's actually going to like go to use the park, or is the park simply a chance to have green space that's not going to be heavily utilized?
It could be a trailhead too. I know there's
Yeah.
It
lots
is.
of trails going around there.
Solid
so
swamp back there.
Isn't
I
that the
boarded
land
at
that Three
French
Rivers
Lake,
just
and
I don't know if you could
it's
say that. Yeah, I don't know if it's Yes, that is, but I don't know if we could if that's well known or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I mean, you're
not
basically-
our plan. If Three Rivers bought that,
Yeah.
they're gonna have to figure out what to use it for.
Yeah, but my understanding is they're talking about using it as a trailhead because they have a big regional trail that's going to go right through this area. So, yeah.
Because I wonder with this business park area, that larger rectangle at the top, if that isn't less desirable in this area.
oh, more like
Yeah.
just
Here,
half,
because
basically half of
because
it.
it touches the lake,
Yeah.
but there's
Sure.
gonna be a lot lost
Yeah.
So
there.
the west,
that's fair.
Yeah, so just cut it in half, basically.
Right where your finger is,
yeah,
Dave.
basically west of where we're drawing Dayton Parkway coming through. Turn that into,
Whatever.
Well, were you talking about the big rectangle on the top here?
Well,
Or-
that piece,
the west.
because the corner of it touches the lake. But I think that the same applies to all of it on the west side of the future.
So essentially trim the
Park,
land
right.
use so that the business park lines up with here, and then these parcels either become part of the medium density or.
Yeah, I would think
I
medium
do
density.
medium density.
Okay.
And then
They
likewise.
won't mind being next to the trailhead
Yeah,
and the
that would be-
natural
Yeah.
resources
Seems like
area
there's-
that,
Yeah,
might
it's
or
more
might not
natural.
You
be
make this
apart.
whole area, if this is the East French Lake Road
That was the
alignment,
same discussion we had last.
you make this whole area consistent with this.
Right. Right.
I agree, Darren,
Yeah,
that I
it's
would
already
swap the
been
red
hashed
below it with the purple.
We had consultants and stuff.
I'd swap it too. Because then you're putting all the business part together, there's a little bit of commercial up north, that's what I would do. I think that makes
mean-
the most sense, personally. And I think that solves the ultimate issue of like,
I don't-
talking about these weird
Yeah.
divided lots south, that we can,
You know, I agree with the swap map. I don't understand why we don't do something to our comp plan, solve the 117. I just-
So essentially taking.
comes down to money. It's expensive to get the comp plan reviewed.
It really is.
Well, if you get a use there you don't want because it's zoned and guided commercial and current zoning, what's worse? It's zoned and guided commercial. You could, whatever's allowed in our code could go there. And it's not set up for that. Nor is it designed for that long-term with the road shifting.
So with the commercial, the red here, let's say, not the same shape, because I don't think it would flip-flop to the same shape up top, but if this commercial here became, I don't know, part of like these three parcels or even all the way up to the top, and then that industrial or the office park, business park, then swaps with it, right? That's what you're saying, is just flip-flop the
Yeah.
two. So then this becomes all of this, like, we'll call it light purple. Would you do the same for this medium-density residential with the commercial corner here and take
The
the...
commercial corner there's gone. It's not gonna be a commercial.
But I mean, do you want to try and get the commercial corner
Reclaim it
here
up top.
and then have this be medium-density
I don't think so.
residential?
Because
Make
Where,
East,
everything
because
south.
East
Yeah.
French
Medium.
Lake Road, no.
okay.
I think you keep it to Dayton Parkway in 117. If anything, you shift the commercial up at this node of Dayton Parkway and where East French Lake Road hits.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're saying just bring this red down into here? Not,
Yeah, sorry, I'm taking notes.
You're good.
Do we have any other thoughts on any of the other areas? Some of this has changed from the existing as well, so there's...
none of this really matters now.
I would think that with the mixed use area, we can do a higher density. And what I would, to meet the density requirement, I would probably make the mixed use higher and decrease some of the high density land area. Because how many acres of high density do we have right now?
So you think you
It's
could
a
go
lot.
north of 60% residential in the mixed use, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, let's just say it's a 4-story building. The only thing that's gonna be commercial is
It's
the
the
first
bottom
floor.
floor, yeah.
So
So
on
you can go
option 3, there is...
Might be a little strong, but I get what you're saying, yeah.
There's 195 acres throughout.
Yeah, so of high
And
density.
and it's a lot of high density, but it's just...
Let's just use 175 usable just for, but that at 20 units an acre, that's 3,500 units. That just seems like a lot of high density.
It's because this area and a couple other areas of Dayton were used to focus to preserve as much low density in the compound
I
as
get that.
possible. So you
No,
have to.
I'm
have
not
density
saying that. I'm
somewhere.
just saying that that's a
I
large
agree, it's a lot of this
concentration.
area. Yeah, it is.
And you could probably, if you're gonna do that, I'd like to see it go more vertical and less horizontal,
Right,
Okay.
is what I'm
Yep.
trying to say.
right, I would
Meaning
agree.
higher density.
So you're talking because the 60% assumption for residential is just a generic assumption on mixed use based on what you find for ratios of commercial to residential. But you're talking about upping the 12 minimum units an acre to 16, 20,
That's a
24.
hard guess, that's a complete guess, I guess. I don't have a good way of,
Because
it's mixed
that'd be
use.
the way to up the
Higher than
density.
12.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you wouldn't.
I
The
don't
assumption
know.
for 60% residential is not really going to change. That's more driven just by the market that we've seen. Is that
Well, every mixed use building, I guess I'm trying to think of why.
so? Like if you have like ground floor retail,
Yeah.
or you have like a residential building next to.
Right.
So like
Every
the,
mixed
the
use building I've
closest
ever
one
worked
is
on
like
is-
Rogers has the new Broadways going in over there with the Asgard high density residential apartments. That's a
Yeah.
mixed use site. It's pretty much 35% commercial. I think it's 65% residential.
So that's a
it's-
3-story building, that's why it's 30, it's 33, yeah.
We're
That
talking
is probably
we're
a
talking
3-story.
land areas.
But it could be mixed use on the parcel, like you could have one entire residential building and then a commercial building by it. It doesn't have to be.
Right, but usually
First
those are even
floor
more
commercial
dominant
and then
commercial.
residential
Yeah,
above
even
it.
those are usually more dominant residential.
Right, I think, and that's what you're saying, right, 65%,
That just
35,
seems
yeah.
light, but
I wouldn't go super high, but I think you could maybe go 65% with it. maybe.
Well, I think what maybe would help is how much commercial acres we got. So how many commercial square feet do we actually gonna have here?
So this section is 60 acres.
60 acres. And that's almost all usable for, right?
The majority, yeah. I mean, there's some
Yeah.
smaller natural environment stuff, but
So with a 6 land to building ratio, that's 425 to 450,000 square feet of commercial.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. And so that's why I
Right.
kind of feel like if we're actually going to have this mixed use area, that it's going to be more residential than mixed use.
Right, and put
And
that
it
in
might-
It's going to be the
perspective.
destination commercial uses.
I think what is
Right.
a Walmart, like a 50, 60K?
They vary, yeah.
Or
That's about right.
somewhere
They can
down
get up
there,
into
right?
80 if they've got a big
Sure.
grocery store component.
But it helps put into perspective. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a lot of square footage.
Yeah, and if you, I mean, not saying we want big boxes, but would struggle to see more than one big box come here. I don't see a hardware store like a Home Depot, Menards coming up here, I just don't.
Right, but like I'm saying, it would take, to fill up all that commercial, it would take
Yeah.
a Walmart, a Home Depot.
Exactly,
Lowe's,
that's
a
exactly,
Menards,
that's
you know what I mean?
right,
Like,
that's exactly where I was
it
going
would
with
take a
that.
lot of big box to do that.
Yeah,
And to your point, you might get one, you might not get any.
right.
You might not want any.
Is that their total footprint, or is this building size?
That's building size.
So that doesn't
You
account
already-
for
you already
the
took some of
parking
that out.
spaces.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
would account for that
Yeah.
too.
So
Well,
that's
he pulled that out.
When I
Yeah.
use the land to
Yeah.
building ratio of 6, I'm basically saying for every acre divided by 6, that's how many
Yeah.
square feet of building you'll have.
Okay.
That's where it helps having
So I think
an
I feel a
appraiser
little,
here.
I feel a little more confident of upping that mixed use, I guess is where this conversation's going.
yeah, I think
16 to 20.
the
We
density.
can
I
always,
think we could up.
I mean, the reality is we're gonna, depending on when this happens, there could be different building standards, designs, everything's gonna be different, so
Yeah.
I would go a little higher and we can,
I'd be a little afraid of going too heavy on the high density residential and thinking it'll go vertical, because we're not gonna, I doubt we'll get a 6-story apartment building here, right?
You'll most
Three
likely
to
get
four.
3 over 1 underground parking.
I could see
is gonna
4.
be your most common.
Yeah.
You can
I
see
just-
a 4th, but as soon as you go to 4 stories, then you have different building structural requirements, and that's cost prohibitive unless you have the.
That's why
roofs
you
to
don't
support
see
it,
that.
typically.
like,
In the suburbs, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to
A
keep
lot
that
of
in mind too.
a lot of the inner ring suburbs all have 4 or 5 stories now. It's kind of, like, if you can support the rents, and that's the question, is what you design around this thing is, can you support the rents?
Isn't that the one towards Osseo, looks like it's a cement first floor, and
Yep.
then they did the wood floor?
Above it.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
The bow line in Champlin, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, how tall is that?
that's 4 and 5, 4 and 5.
Sure.
So,
I think that's about as tall as you get.
I mean, yeah, if you went 6, the whole issue is you need 2 levels of underground parking, and that just kills the feasibility. But I think when you think of this town center, though, you have to think about making it attractive so you can attract renters that want to live here that can afford to pay these higher rents, because it's not going to be cheap new construction.
I think from that perspective, I think positive comments are encouraged as well. I do like what you did along 121st, as you think about connecting the commercial to the mixed use to the park. I can envision coming in from east to west and seeing how that would transition and get you to the park as the park and lake is your destination. And I like that you kept that consistent on all 3, because I
That was the
like that. I
strongest
think
feedback
that
we got on the survey.
I think
was
that makes a ton of sense.
tying the town center to the park so that you have essentially your focal open green space area that ties into.
And I think as you
mixed
go
use.
down that corridor, right, you're going to be marching towards the lake. I like the way that's set up. Any other positive comments?
Well, okay, so out of curiosity, what would it attract you to spend $2,500 a month on rent in Dayton?
I think some walkability down there. Walkability, I think, would
Retail
be something.
users, I mean, you need, that's why people like high-density cores. They want to be able to walk to get their food, their coffee.
So say the ability to
That's the
take my
whole point. Walk
wagon
to
to
the
the
bar,
grocery
whatever
store
you're
and go
doing.
back
Yeah.
without using the car, you know,
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of those kind of things.
Or hoof it to the park and look at the lake a little bit with your dog, and
Yeah.
come
Downtown style type
back
living.
and grab a sandwich
Right.
at a little cafe.
Right, and when you think of master planning, this is the area, like in this current diagram, you target the commercial because now you're master planning stormwater too.
Yep, and
And
that's
then you can really pack the density in here is what you want to create that environment.
and that's the area we do have. And I know Planning Commission is the only one that's seen this, so council wouldn't have seen it. But this specific area, and even more so this specific area with the mixed use in the park, is where a lot of the text in the master plan, and we can call it a future land use study or whatever we're going to call it, shows higher architectural standards, build to lines, things like that to kind of create that pedestrian environment, specifically on Dayton Parkway. I know there's some conversation of what Dayton Parkway looks through, or not Dayton Parkway, 121st looks like through here. So that's a lot of what that text gets at, to focus in, because we don't talk about in there specifically master planning what the developments will look like in the high density residential.
That's why I
So I
kind of
think
feel like
that's
we should
some of that-
unwind that to myself, because it's confusing to the public. It was confusing when you presented it to us.
Okay.
Because it was all wound in there. I just unwind it.
Okay.
Because I think
Well-
what you're saying is very pertinent, but it's pertinent to this little specific area.
Okay. Well, then I'll make a note to make sure that when we present this back to Commission's Council's open house, I'll include a note like that or background on that to help.
Right. I mean, is it wrong to even draw a dashed line somewhere and say this is the master plan area subject to what those things you're
I mean,
talking about?
I can include a blown up diagram. This
the rest is
this
land
area
use
when we
amendments?
talk about it in the actual document does define saying we're talking specifically about this area off of this diagram. So it does reference back and forth between it. I think that's some of the feedback I'd be looking for more on the actual document itself and less so on when we're talking about the land uses on the map right now. But I do want that feedback so that I know what's not clear, because the document should be as readable as if I were to go home and hand it to my mom that she could read it. Having no background in Dayton or planning at all or anything like that, to be able to understand what we're getting at, so that hopefully that means every resident within Dayton can understand it as well.
So land use so we've kind of talked about that this would become business park, and we talked about shifting some commercial down to here. I think that this is high density. I think that this should flow. Like, almost like imagine another service road coming down here. And so when you think about land uses, you should be thinking about there's another road here, and so you could have more commercial uses like Dennis was saying, or you can always pivot at that time, if maybe more small business or highway commercial. Is that?
So it's more, you're just saying pull back some of the commercial from here and instead transition and phase it this way a little bit?
Yeah, whether it's commercial or business park, I mean, I guess we gotta pick something now, but when the time comes, we'll know more, but yeah, but again, and I don't know how we do this, but that's what I really wanted to see in this plan is the roads that we can't forget about. And so, to me, the service road, maybe that's obvious, but to me, that's what you want to understand is, all right, here's your intersection, here's your intersection, here's your intersection, but traffic can free flow as much as it wants behind it with all the curb cuts.
Yeah, there will be
It's very
secondary
limited
access
on Dayton Parkway, right, and that's
right.
what I mean by this, by a service road there.
Yeah, there will be secondary streets. This is only showing
Right.
those high-level future arterial,
Right.
major collectors.
Right.
It's
And
not
so-
showing the local roads and the minor
Right.
collectors that are going to be interspersing all the traffic to these major
Yeah,
corridors.
so to me, if the topography, I mean, that's the whole issue, I don't know the topography. If it's not that level, then I get why we're doing high density, but if it's fairly level, I could see this even becoming business park. I mean, you can always pivot in the future if it's not that, but.
None of the grade in here is prohibitive for development, I'll say. When I looked at it just to look at, are we going to run into bluffs? Are we going to run into
Right.
major topography that's going to impact development? There is some grade change. The high point's essentially right here, 978. But all the grade as it changes, I mean, your 2-foot contours are well apart where the grade change, at most is you have some 10% slopes, maybe 12% at best. And those are for short runs where you could balance that out over a site. So none of it would be prohibitive for the development to go in. So that was a factor in evaluating, just to see, is this land usable? I mean, because this is, this doesn't have the natural resources overlay, because then the colors get a little bit much. But this is not shown as a lake, even though it's an unnamed lake on all the maps. But that would be the only area where it's a significant portion is undevelopable.
One suggestion I might have too is flip that to high density and flip this to medium density. That's about in the low. keep the medium here next to the lake, but flip that to high, and then shift this to medium with the transitions.
So then we'd be fine having high next to it. All of this is the ag preserve
It's-
parcels, which are,
It's gonna become something different
Yeah.
eventually.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that seems to make sense to me as well.
Is that, I know Darren's been drawing, jotting, is that consensus around?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it would be nice to see some other quarter down where Darren was about the parkway there.
Like-
Yep, some
So like you said,
quarter there.
yeah, so
Maybe
like
scrape
moving,
some of the commercial.
scrape, yeah, because 60 acres is
Scrape it off
probably,
this side.
is kind of the max you'd want to see for commercial. Having evaluated like other commercial areas in the northwest metro and west metro,
I'd be shocked if we had
60
more.
acres is on the high end. It's, it's shown as a bubble, you're like, this is how much we think maximum could support, and it may scale back as development actually comes in when it develops in the staging plan, in 10 years, 20 years maybe. So we'd want to, gaining commercial here, we'd want to lose some here.
Yeah, for
So I think
sure.
trimming back, probably trying to tie with parcels as best we can. So maybe it's here, maybe it's here. I'll do that math based on, how much area would we gain by adding it here to lose
Yeah.
here. And then maybe if you feel 60 is a little high, we could go back, like 45 to 50 is
And
fine
what
too,
is-
but I think preserving the land for commercial gives you the option
Yeah.
to then trim it back later.
Yeah.
when
Right.
development
And that
comes in.
helps, because if it's not commercial, it's likely mixed use. And
Mixed
if it's
use,
mixed
or,
use,
or it
it
becomes
helps.
high density on the back end.
Right.
Yeah.
All of which
Transition,
helps the calculations
Yep.
with respect to density.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather see commercial along the thoroughfare.
Okay.
And you know what might happen with the commercial along the thoroughfare is businesses are adapting to so much with internet sales that you might have drive-through business park buildings where you have a drive-up door, and instead of waiting 2 days for your product, you go get it.
And realistically, and I don't think big box is something that would even happen at this site. If you think about
You need way more rooftops.
Hy-Vee
Yeah.
struggled to go down by Target and Maple Grove. That lot's for sale. They didn't have the rooftops they needed to do it.
I
You
could
know,
see a Hy-Vee or Target here, but it has to be like
I don't think
late
so.
in the cycle. Late in the
Yeah,
cycle.
real late.
Yeah, we need way more rooftops. You
You'd also have to have a connection over the Mississippi.
think so?
I think so.
Could
I don't
be
think you'll
serving
get the
our community.
ADT. I don't think you'll get the ADT on it to get the pass-by traffic that they would want.
Yeah, it's about rooftops.
You know,
Draw
yeah.
radiuses, because they're serving communities, they're not serving traffic.
With Rogers not far away.
I mean, there's a
I'm not saying it'll
close
happen.
your eyes and
There's
turn,
yeah.
and you can get to a
I can
target
almost
within
bike to
like.
3 targets
Yeah.
probably.
So if you draw them out on maps, they're all about 3 to 4 miles apart. And if you put one right there in Dayton, it's 3 to 4
3 to 4.
miles from all the targets.
Is
So
it really?
that's how it works.
Okay.
But you gotta have the rooftops first.
Right.
What's our medium density? Units per
Low
acre.
end 6.
6. Okay. I think
That's
fair.
pretty standard for medium. And this is all assuming, this is keeping the 2 units an acre as a minimum density for low, which was the carrying over from that comp plan.
Do we have any consensus on if we want to get a little more aggressive with the high density from 20 to 25? I think we should, but I mean, I don't want to hurt ourselves either that 10 years down the road,
We can only approve super dense.
but I think
Things.
it's the reality. I really do.
What does the building look like that supports that?
So back in think of Maple Grove, there's a lot of apartments built in the 90s.
Like by
They're
Cub
beautiful.
Foods.
Does it say
Right by
McDonald's
Bass Lake
corridor?
Road
Yeah,
too,
yep, yep.
Bass Lake Trails. But they're about 15 units an acre, but it's because they have massive green spaces. And what the market has kind of found out is it's just something to look at. Is like,
Space, yeah.
why not take that green space and preserve it for the public better and, let them go more vertical. That's the way I view density, is not create a bunch of green space on every property. That's maintenance, that they fertilize and do all this other stuff too. So 25 units an acre, like Bowline is almost 40 units an acre, but that's all hardscape for the most part. That's the one in Champlin right at the river. That's all hardscape. So that's why I think the happy medium is somewhere between 25 and 30. The newer one down in Maple Grove, right on 81 and Territorial, the newest one, those are right around 30. The newest 2, I should say.
81 in territory? What are you talking about? Fernbrook.
Fernbrook, yeah, Fernbrook and, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd be okay with 25.
25.
I think it makes it look more
It's
logical
gonna be
than
case by
have.
case. I mean, someone might come in and say, I wanna do 30 or 40 because I can see across the
You're gonna
lake.
look at
I
it.
can
Or
see-
if they think they can get the
Debate.
rents, people are gonna do as many units as they can,
Yeah.
which, if you keep your footprint small, I'm all for it in the areas that it's appropriate.
Once you've gone that direction, you might as well
Yep,
go that direction. You know?
yep.
Yeah, I'll look at
That's,
this.
so it's more
see
about
if that's
setting the
something that's
minimum, not
feasible.
the,
Right.
Not the maximum, right?
the only thing that sometimes people get worried about the maximum is building heights, but usually feasibility takes care of
Cost will
that.
take care of that, yeah.
You just can't have parking. Like that's, at the end of the day, you can't park that many.
Well, that's what Minneapolis did, is they said, fine, we don't need to have parking requirements.
That's 'cause
We're in the
you
suburbs,
don't
we need
a
to have
car.
parking requirements.
Yeah.
And what they found out is the projects that have good parking get way better rents than the ones that don't. Because people
Believe
still
that.
have cars, especially when you're paying
It still
$2,500 a
becomes
month.
winter here.
Yeah,
Yes.
You still have one.
happens every year.
The only other comment that I had, and we touched on it early on, so I'm not sure how solid I am on it anymore, but that area across 117th from Rayburn Trails, I kind of like the idea of having that low density and to make a little better transition from that low density to the medium density.
So
that's above it.
stealing essentially this transition from Rayburn up?
Yes.
So that'd be
So
around,
in your option too, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
that'd be around Lake Dubay.
Yeah, you'd have, you know, like this northern portion of this part, like this is all kind of basically part of the Dubay. All that. So it's basically, you'd just be wrapping the south side a little bit around, so. Is that,
Yeah, that seems.
Yeah,
like
I don't mind it. Like I said, you have to transition from low to medium at some point, and I think you just got to ask yourself whether or not you want to do that in an existing neighborhood or a future neighborhood to be determined, right? You know, and you can say, well, your neighborhood, when they came in there, they knew that they were going to be abutting medium. I'd say, you know,
That neighborhood-
Rayburn
that-
doesn't necessarily have that argument.
That
And have to
neighborhood
do
didn't
that.
know they were getting a substation.
That's existing.
yeah.
Well, 'cause that was my
Rayburn is
concern too, but
currently
right now they're-
adjacent to high density.
That's
commercial.
So I guess they,
So right now,
kind of knew what they were
they
getting
knew they were
themselves into.
getting-
The developers did. Maybe the
I was
I was
gonna
gonna
suppliers
say,
did.
Yeah.
the residents.
Consumer probably didn't, but
No.
somebody else knew.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the developers certainly did. Yeah, we have already cut an airflow for that, so, a couple times.
No matter what, it's going to be not in my backyard, right? I mean, the transition has to happen somewhere, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily disagree. And I
It
think
just seemed like
I
it
think
could
Lake
be
Dubay
designed
might
into it if you
provide a
know.
little bit of opportunity to be low density and around it too.
I could
so.
see that area that we just labeled becoming a park someday,
Around Lake Dubay.
on the south side of it, where there's island. Because it's gonna be tough, I mean, you think about it, it's gonna be,
Tough to develop.
it's be tough to throw roads in there,
Well,
and,
Mhm.
but that's,
Is there a big park in Rayburn? I haven't been in there.
There will be.
Yeah.
There
There will be?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's an 11-acre one planned.
Four corners.
Yeah, there's
or
the,
something. Yeah.
these ones.
Yeah, just say the
These
four
four
corners.
corners.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright. Well, it seems like we're in better shape.
Yeah, and any other comments?
Are there any other aspects of like option one we didn't even really look at? Can you remind us what the difference is on option one?
Option
Make sure
one
there's not something over there that we
kept-
kind of like to.
Yeah. Option one kept more high density residential because that
Oh,
is the one where I
got it.
didn't up the density calculation, so you have more acres of high density residential,
let's
which I
go
think
the opposite
everybody
direction of what we
agreed
just talked
so far
about.
through all the conversations that
That's
we
why that
want to
one's
up
off.
the density, get less
so
acreage.
when we up
Okay.
it to 25, are we envisioning taking some medium density out, or what are we just gonna say, we're just gonna go with higher density for now in general in the area and figure it out later?
We'll have to see, I guess. So when we're at 15 units an acre on option one, we had 256 acres of high density. When we go to 20, we're at 175. So you lose 70 something acres of high density residential. That was essentially then adjusted to either medium or low, depend, like in certain areas is how I adjusted it. So if going to 25 is what we can do and still, you know, like not have people not develop high density residential. say we go from 175 down to 125 or something like that to get to the right amount of units, we would essentially have 50 acres to play with to say we don't have to have this high density. What do we shape it as?
I would suggest if you were gonna suck in more low density, keep it coming in this area and maybe
Agreed.
up this area.
Okay.
So-
I typically been doing that from the boundaries of the,
Yeah.
assuming that this
Yeah.
transition here, high density versus or next to low density is not terrible, but if you can transition from low to medium to high, ideally you like to do that. So this is a boundary that's high to low, high to low, high to ag preserve.
We switched the one, right? The upper corner, didn't we swap the
So we were
northwest and
talking about
northeast?
this going to.
Yeah, we swapped the northwest and
I didn't
northeast,
think
right?
about it. Oh my gosh, this pen is running out of me. So this is high to then get something in
over
this
there.
corner to medium.
Yeah.
It seems like we're looking at adjusting it within that square. Why would we not bank some of that high density for outside
Agreed.
the square?
Agreed.
We could.
Okay.
That-
To me,
I agree
we should put
entirely.
the high density where we think it goes, the medium density where we think
This is
it
where you
goes.
can get away with high density.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we'll have the road, yep.
So
And then-
essentially, like saying you get 50 acres that you don't need, but you put it here anyways. It means you could then adjust things
Later on.
outside of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you get more units, say we go from
Okay.
the existing land use plan, you had to have 5,023 units based on density and all the acreages that were in there. That's what you have to end with to make sure it balances citywide. But if all of a sudden we do this and you're at, we'll just say you get an extra 1,000 units and here you're at 6,000 units, you can then reduce
Everybody
surrounding areas
Later
within the
on,
city
right.
to go down.
But we should do that with a comp plan update, because I think Met Council will hold that against you. If, you know what I mean, you want to ride that line when you would submit
That's
the
my
comp
concern.
plan.
Well, that's
right?
that's
You
what
wanna
I
make
was
sure
gonna
it
ask. That's my
balances to
concern. If
what
all of a
you
sudden
want.
we say, look, we can go all 6 density, they're gonna be like, great,
Sweet.
4 units an acre, we should get 5 units an
Yeah.
acre. Like, they're just gonna constantly be pushing us to
Yeah.
make
No
up for
good
everyone
deed to go
else.
unpunished.
Well,
It's
you know,
not specific to Dayton. It's
Yeah.
I know it's not,
Yeah.
but we're the developable land.
We don't want it
so
to-
we are going to be the one that's going to bear the brunt of that over the next
Kind of a shining star
few
in that
decades.
moment, yeah.
But none of this is
So-
gonna come out until we redo our comp plan.
Right.
I understand that.
And so, I think
But
what
it's to
Dennis
keep
is
it
saying,
in
if there's
mind.
people in consensus, is when we shift the high density to 25 units an acre, don't shift more low density for now.
Yeah.
But when we do the comp plan update, we'll either gonna have to maybe adjust this, or, I know there's a bunch of medium
Yeah.
density on the east side of Fernwood.
We'd
That
have
seems a
to,
little
I would say we'd
misplaced.
have to
We
adjust
could
it
change
by the
that to
time
low
the
if
comp
it
plan.
worked out.
Because once you give that to Met Council, they're not going to let you take it back.
Yeah.
Well, that's my concern.
Right?
Yeah, we give it to Met Council, and then all of a sudden
Right.
it's like, oh, this didn't come to fruition. We want to
shift
change
something.
it.
So-
No, we
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
anymore.
I'll just explain for some clarity here. So like this, what we're showing here is being used as part of that 2050 comp plan update. So none of this will actually change on the land use plan when this goes forward. This is essentially a guidance document for that. That you could then use as part of that greater 2050 update to maybe, reduce the medium density by Fernbrook, as you mentioned, or things like that. This would all go in at once to Met Council. That way you wouldn't be like bumping it up to 3.4 within
Okay.
the city and then trying to drag it back down
Yeah.
to 3.1.
Okay.
It would all be going in as one, essentially, to say, we're still going to, stay at 3.03 to 3.04.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be some minor fluctuation.
And if
But
we-
here's the way we're balancing
Yeah.
all of that.
And if we just,
then when we get to that point, they do force every community in the metro to go to 4 units an acre, every community is going to have to
Band together.
figure
Yeah,
out how
I was gonna say.
to. I don't know.
We'll have a lot
We're
of
not going
bands
to talk about
together.
that now because
We
it'll
really
open up a
won't
can of
have any
worms for
band together.
everybody.
Who else are we going to
So-
band together with?
There's a lot of
Within the
people
Met
on the
Council
west
down
side
here.
that are very
Corcoran.
Corcoran, Rogers, although Rogers depends on the day.
I will say I did like seeing all of the elected officials from all of those cities on the meeting that I was on listening
Yep.
to.
Yep.
Because you guys can ask questions I can't, being having to work with
I
the
got,
council to
the question I
face
asked,
to
I
face.
kind of got the same answer. We've had them here, the Met Council.
What?
They,
Oh, that they appreciate that you're on there? Oh.
no, they just, some of the stuff they're just making up. I mean, they're simply blowing smoke, so it's very irritating. So when you were saying we want to kind of keep these numbers, you're just saying so we don't get stung later on by having to play catch up elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah, I get that.
Well, if that's everything.
good.
I think
Good.
we can give you guys a break between
Give 20
work
minutes
session and
back.
Council, yeah.
I'm good.
It's more butter than
Right.
Who said that?
All right, so we're adjourned.
I think what you really want to avoid
Thanks,
is
guys.
Thank you.
the last community fighting the council.
Yeah,
They will take you down. They will take you down. Perfect. If you're the last community fighting the council, they will take you down.
You just gotta be like Medina and somebody. I did.